Crooked River, Chapter 20. Mr. Evans caught sight of us and waved us over to a row where she was sitting. "Your pa's up there testifying to the truth right now," she hollered out, loud as an old crow, and my cheeks flushed when people's heads turned to stare. As we sat down next to Mrs. Evans, we heard the judge say that the jury would now hear the testimony of the witness, Major Lorenzo Carver. I saw Augustus Root stand up and move toward my pa. He was a lawyer from the East who had been living in our settlement for nearly 2 years. But I must confess, me and Laura never took much of a liking to him. Mr. Root seemed to think more highly of himself than a person should, and was terribly fond of listening to the sound of his own voice. He was also the only man we knew who still dressed in knee breeches and stockings, and truth to speak, Mr. Root's legs were nothing to look at neither. Scrawny old bird legs and white stockings. When no one was around, me and Laura called him Rooster Root, on account of his legs and his peculiar habit of puffing out his chest when he spoke. "Tell us, Major Carver," he said, moving in quick steps toward the witness chair. "Tell us in your own words exactly what happened in regards to the Indian we have brought before us this morning." "Well now," my pa gazed at Mr. Root and answered slowly, "I think you and everybody else on the jury knows exactly what happened. I don't need to go and repeat all the details, do I, Augustus?" He looked out at the crowd. "We all live round here, and we ain't the kinds to keep secrets, is we?" But I could tell that the judge rose up. His robe was almost touching his ears, and he leaned forward to stare at my pa in the witness chair. "Mr. Carver," he said slowly, giving my pa a look that could have withered a cornstalk in July, "I don't give one damned fig what everybody in this town knows or doesn't know. This is a court of law. You tell the jury exactly what you know. Do you understand?" Right at that moment I felt a small flicker of hope for Indian John and Peter Kelly. I didn't dare to look over at Laura, but I could hear her give a soft whisper under her breath. Maybe Peter Kelly was right about the judge being more powerful than any of the men in our settlement. I had never seen anybody stand up to my pa. He was feared on both sides of the river. But Judge James R. Noble didn't seem to take any notice of that fact. In the silence after the judge scolded my pa, I watched as Mr. Root patted a handkerchief carefully across his forehead and blew his nose loudly. I figured my father was supposed to be on the same side as him, and my pa was not acting according to his plans. But then he didn't act according to anyone's plans except his own. Mr. Root took a long while to fold his handkerchief into a small neat square and tucked it back into his frock coat before beginning again. I guessed he was trying to give Pa time to stop stewing in his chair. "To continue," he said finally, giving Pa a small encouraging smile. "Please tell us, Major Carver, in your own words, what happened earlier this spring, and how you came to capture the Indian before us today." My pa crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. He fixed his eyes on Mr. Root and didn't look once at the crowd or the jury, and especially not the judge. Just spoke straight to the lawyer as if he was the only other person there. "In the month of April this year," he said, "me and my men got word that a poor trapper named Gibbs had been found dead, killed by Indians at the end of March." "And where was the trapper found?" "Other side of Crooked River." Pa waved his arms as if he was standing right on the river's edge. "Over there, the western side." "And what did you do after hearing about the dead trapper?" "Well," Pa said, sending a hard spit of tobacco to the ground, "I got all my men together, maybe 10 of us there was, and we went across the river at the end of April to hunt for the 3 Indians who done it." "I see." Mr. Root nodded slowly and rubbed his chin as if he was pretending to think hard. "You say Indians did this," he repeated. "But how did you know that for certain, Major Carver?" "Whether or not Indians killed the trapper, you mean?" "Yes." Mr. Root nodded solemnly. Pa gave a little snort. "He had an Indian tomahawk stuck into his skull, that's how." He paused and added, "Reckon that would kill just about anybody now, wouldn't it?" A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd, and the judge leaned forward to say something, but before he did, Mr. Root hurried on with his next question. How did you know which particular Indians did it? Folks around here and over there told us, Pa said. They ain't dumb. What folks? Do I gotta go and name them all? Pa scowled. I ain't got all year to sit here for this trial. Just a few of them, Mr. Root insisted, taking out his folding handkerchief again. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Carver, please. I'll see if I can recollect them all, Pa answered. With a loud sigh, we talked to Blacksmith Nichols, who made the Indian's tomahawk, the man who found the fellow dead on his land, another trapper who hunted with the dead man, a fellow whose barn got burnt down by the same Indians last summer, he said, counting them one by one on his fingers, as if to show how many there were. And all of them told you the same thing. Yes, sir. What was it that they told you, exactly? That the murderer had been done by 3 particular Indians who had been giving them trouble for a while. 3 Indians, Mr. Root repeated loudly. My pa nodded. One of which, he pointed, is sitting over there. The crowd hushed as everybody leaned forward to look in the direction of Indian John, who was seated in a chair near the front. I was pleased that his chair didn't face the crowd. All anybody could get a glimpse of was the back of his head and the brown cloth of his plain shirt. The white blanket that I had often seen folded next to him in the loft was draped over his left shoulder. Only the judge and jury could see the fierce stripes that my pa had made. When you say trouble, of what sort do you mean? Continued Mr. Root. Pa leaned forward and put his hands on his knees. Augustus, you know as well as me that we have been bothered by these hostile savage Indians for years. I don't got to name all the troubles they cause. He spit loudly and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. We try to clear our land and plant our fields, raise our families in peace, and they kill our women and children, steal our food, burn down our barns. Ain't no secret who's doing it if you live around here. Folks all around me were nodding and agreeing, as if it had happened to every last one of them. To be truthful, I didn't know anybody it had happened to. Nobody in a Crooked River settlement had ever been killed by Indians. Not in my memory. Only thing I'd ever heard were stories from other places. Enough, the judge said loudly, pinning a glare on Pa and Augustus Root. Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Root said quickly. That's all. There were some hoots and shouts from the men in the crowd, but I couldn't tell the meaning exactly. Regardless, the judge didn't appear to pay them any mind. He just turned toward the other side of his table. Your questions, Mr. Kelly. As Mr. Kelly stood up and walked toward the witness stand, it seemed the dark cloud had cast over the sun, and the air got suddenly colder. Folks leaned back and crossed their arms as if they had caught a chill. I heard a loud whispering start up all around me. Maybe the judge heard it too, because he gave the crowd a long, sweeping stare. Mr. Kelly, he repeated loudly, according to the law, it is now your turn to question the witness, Major Carver, as he is popularly known. My heart pounded as young Mr. Kelly walked toward my pa's chair. One time we had a little brown dog who was killed one morning trying to fight off a wild bear. If you had ever seen that happen, you know the sickening feeling that comes from watching the terrible scene unfold and being helpless to do a thing about it. That's exactly how I felt as Mr. Kelly stood in front of my pa. Major Carver, Peter Kelly said in a voice that was full of nerves, you say you were told, or well, heard, that 3 Indians were responsible for this crime, correct? Yes, sir. My pa shot back. That's what I said. So you didn't see the dead man yourself. My pa leaned forward ominously, and just out of pure habit, I moved back in my seat. You trying to tell me that the poor trapper weren't dead? He said real low. Peter Kelly's face turned a shade of red, and he stumbled over his answer. I'm only trying to find out what you saw so the jury knows exactly. I don't need to see a dead man to know he's dead, my pa spat. From behind them came the judge's voice. Answer the question, Mr. Carver. Did you see the dead man with your own eyes? No. The witness says no, the judge repeated, giving Peter Kelly a stern, fatherly sort of look. Move on to your next question. I could see the lawyer's shoulders go up and down as he took in a trembling breath of air. He shuffled through the papers in his hand, and when he started again it seemed to me that he spoke with a trifle more courage and conviction. "Would you describe the 3 Indians you tried to catch?" "There was 2 grown Indians and 1 real young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years of age." "And what happened to them?" "Well, the boy run off from us before we could catch him. We were told by that Indian," Pa motioned toward Indian John, "that the boy was known by the name of Simmo." When I hear the name Simmo, I laugh inside my mouth. The men who caught me wanted the name of the young Indian who ran. I told them, "Simmo, shame and dirt." The Gichi-Mukamang wandered in the woods for hours, calling out shame and dirt, while my son, little Otter, slipped away. Inside my mouth I laugh.